We're going to talk about the sins of motherhood. In the past month, I have read various books. The first being Mama by Terry McMillan, the second being Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng, and the third being Child of Fortune by Yuko Tsushima. In each of these books, a mother is the main character, and the way that she struggles to figure out herself in relationship to her daughter, struggles to figure out how to make the best choices for her daughter, in some cases daughters, all of these things are incredibly present, and it reminded me that one thing that I love about fiction is that it can provide just as much material to wrestle with, just as much empathy building and personal connection as perhaps all of the incredibly compelling stats and statistics about these types of relationships. Tangent aside, let's start with Mama by Terry McMillan. So the titular character in this book, Mama, is a woman who's had to make a lot of really hard decisions. She has a husband who cheats on her. She has kids that are her pride and joy and identity, but keep growing out of clothes and needing more food to eat. She's in a community with people that she doesn't really trust. She has like a couple real good friends, but it's just a town where it feels like nothing happens, or the few things that happen just on a repeat every single day. And throughout this book, we see the ways in which she stands up to her abusive husband. We see the ways that she lets her anger and jealousy drive a wedge between her and one of her daughters. We see the ways in which she makes poor financial decisions when she promises some things and delivers on others, and how she shows her love for her children throughout it all, and how proud of them she is in the end, with the understanding that they've all grown up to be independent human beings that she cannot control. And the thing about this book is that it doesn't just show the internal life and struggles and flaws and brilliance of a mother, it also does it in a way that doesn't feel exploitative or feels in any way like it's mocking the things that she went through. Sometimes I feel like books can have that point of view of their characters, and this book just absolutely didn't have that at all. I also shouldn't have been surprised that it was such a great story about a group of Black women headed by this matriarch, because this was the same author of Waiting to Exhale. The other book that I got me thinking about mothers was Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. Celeste knows what she's doing when she's talking about motherhood. And in this book, I feel like she follows through on that theme very beautifully. So in this story, you have an interracial couple, a white mother and an Asian American father, who have two mixed children. And the expectations that each of these parents have are frankly ridiculous. The way that they completely dismiss and ignore their brother's needs in order to lavish favoritism and support on the sister, the way they make the sister feel like she can't be a real person. She constantly has to do everything they say and want, to the point of pretending she has friends on the phone, or spending so much time focused on science because her mother wanted to be a doctor but didn't because she got pregnant. Like it's a really interesting book in which you would discover on the first page that golden child I mentioned is dead, and nobody knows why. And so you spend the rest of the book, oh my gosh, forgive me, she actually has 3 siblings, one child who was always ignored and left out. I'm so sorry. But this whole book is about this family handling this event or not handling it, and the cracks that it widens and deepens in their somewhat perfect all-American veneer. And this mother, I found incredibly empathetic, because she was someone who wanted to outgrow what people expected of her. She wanted to be a doctor, which during this time period, there were very few, if any, women doctors. She did great in math and science. She did great in school. She went to college, which was a huge accomplishment, and then ended up falling in love with her professor. Technically, she dropped the class after they got together. They make these plans for her to continue her degree, because of course he supports education, but she gets pregnant. And so motherhood really derails her entire life. Something I find so interesting about Everything I Never Told You, as well as Mama, is the ways in which these women are forcing their daughters to learn these skills, trying to force their daughters to behave in certain ways because they believe that will serve them best. And oftentimes these mothers are forcing the exact opposite onto their daughters as what was forced onto them, and seeing it as liberatory, because they are not putting the same old traditional expectations on their child. They're really preparing their child for something in the future. And the last book I want to talk about around this theme of motherhood is a Japanese novel from 1978 called called Child of Fortune. And this main character is a woman who is prone to prophetic dreams and beautiful images. She is a divorced mother in the 70s, raising an 11-year-old girl, very smart, very precocious, who is choosing to actually live with her aunt on her compound with her married husband and her cousins, as opposed to with her mom. And what unfolds is a small story spanning from when the girl is about 4 years old to when she is 11 years old, in which you learn about the mother's divorce, the subsequent affair she had with the husband of another wife, someone in her friend group, about the ways that she desperately wanted this affair partner to act as a father figure to her child. But once she learned that her affair partner was expecting a child with his own wife, she cut off the relationship and couldn't handle it. There is a really fascinating twist at the end of this book that relates to the incredibly strong feelings of ambivalence, and I mean this in the most literal sense of the word, ambivalence, around whether or not she wants to potentially have another child. And I think this relationship she has with her daughter is so interesting because the one theme throughout the book is this woman knows that she is stubborn. This woman knows that she does things in specific ways and that she has never wanted to walk the same path as everybody else. This is a type of woman who actually respects her daughter from yelling at her and telling her how she feels, as opposed to the other members of her family sitting quietly and staring, but never actually making a move to look at her. She's that type of woman, a woman that I find really fascinating, even as I watch her make these choices that I absolutely hate. And I don't think reading is about finding main characters that you can identify with perfectly and use as self-inserts. All of the mothers in this book, from Mama to Child of Fortune to Everything I Never Told You, are people. They are deeply flawed people who are making choices based on a variety of factors. But what I find so interesting is that in these novels in particular, you can see some of the consequences of those decisions. You can see the way certain things turned out and imagine how they could have been differently if a number of factors were changed. But given that these stories were specifically about the mothers and daughters, that relationship specifically, as opposed to the very exploitative, women are just catty, mothers and daughters hate each other type of stuff, which I'm sure has a place somewhere. So those were a lot of thoughts and feelings about those three books that center mothers, about some of my feelings around motherhood and how the question of motherhood is, I feel, is essentially unescapable for women and people socialized as women. I just find these books really interesting for the ways that they challenge me and the ways that I think about why I'm judging the character for one action but not another. And I think all the women in these books tried to hold on to some kind of balance between doing things for me and doing things for my kids, but in different ways. They all kind of yanked too hard in one direction, in my opinion, to consequences that had lasting effects. This was the latest edition of a Jesus H. Christ on a Cross. I'm Shay. This is my son, Maury. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk about mothers. Good night.